Good evening and welcome to Moving Forward, a production of the Bain Grantstown Advancement Association. The principal objective of this program is to identify obstacles in the progress of our beautiful nation, and with the help of all well-wishers in studio and all of you out there, we seek to reduce, if not completely remove, these obstacles. Now, 20 years ago, a very serious obstacle presented itself, which posed a threat to the positive national development of the Bahamas. We talk about the proposed development of a gated community at Clifton Point, one of the most valuable sites in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. With the help of a lot of organizations and hundreds of individuals, the Coalition to Save Clifton, which was formed for the specific purpose of stopping this project, we lobbied hard, fought hard, and eventually we stopped that particular development. Several years later, another very, very serious threat presented itself to the continued development of the Land Sea Park at Clifton, and I refer to the unregulated, illegal coastal development at Sims Point, aka Nygaard Key. Once again, a small group of organizations and individuals joined the coalition in battle to protect Clifton Bay. And today, thank God, we have succeeded to the point where we can now begin to claim victory. The coalition is in the midst of celebrating its 20th anniversary, having been formed in 1999. And recently we hosted an event where we invited all of the warriors that we could contact to participate in a social gathering, which was the first time many of us had gotten together since the battle. And they were recognized for their contribution, and they were awarded. Among the missing to that event was someone who made a tremendous contribution to the battle to save Clifton, which was the first battle, and then the battle to protect Clifton Bay, which was the second phase of that battle. And that individual is Mr. Robert Francis Kennedy Jr., better known as Bobby. And this evening we are delighted to have him as our very, very special guest on this program. The Coalition to Save Clifton, in its continuing celebrations, invited Mr. Kennedy to return to the Bahamas to celebrate with us, among other things. As you will hear later in the program, this is not his first time being a guest of the coalition as we fought to save Clifton. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let us introduce Mr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Bobby, welcome. Good to have you on the program.
Great to be back.
Oh, yes, good to have you on the program.
And good to be in the Bahamas.
Oh, yeah. We describe you as a friend of the Bahamas because over the many years, you've demonstrated, a love for the Bahamas, you and your family. And of course, this goes way back. Not only your personal family, but your father's family. And we have just taken you in as one of our brothers. But let me just tell you a little more about Mr. Kennedy. In addition to all that you may know about him, like, for example, that he is the son of the former Senator and U.S. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy Sr. He is also the nephew of the former President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. And the Kennedy name is very, very popular here in the Bahamas. Bobby is also an international environmentalist, and he's very vocal in his activism. He looks very calm and quiet there, but when he begins to activate against the abuses to the environment, you see some fire. And so, in addition to all of these things, he's the co-founder and president of Waterkeeper Alliance. He's going to tell you a bit about that later. He's also the senior attorney for the Natural Resources Defense Council in the United States. So having said all that, once again, welcome. Good to have you.
Thank you for having me, Reverend.
Well, those of you who were around a little while will recall that in 1999, when the first mention of this upscale gated community was made public here in Nassau, the coalition was formed to actually fight that. Once we engaged the battle, we realized that this was a formidable opponent and we needed help. It was brought to our attention that persons like Bobby worldwide were interested in what was happening here. And so we wrote Mr. Kennedy in the year 2000 and asked him if he would consider coming here to lend his international influence and connections to this fight. And to our surprise, because I didn't know him before that, he readily accepted, came down here, and joined the fight physically. Tell us about that.
Well, we met with, I think one of our first big events was at your church that you put on, which was radio broadcast.
Yes.
And I think in many ways, I had seen these kind of fights all over the Caribbean and all over the developing world. And I think I was able in some ways to frame it in a way that where people understood that something very important and something fundamental was being taken from them. Mm-hmm. The Crown Land, what we're seeing all over the Caribbean is that large international corporations using a colonial model are coming into these nations and occupying the shoreland, refusing access to the local people, and essentially boxing people into the sweltering centers of their nations with really no access to the ocean anymore. And we have to remember that the Crown Land is an ancient concept. It goes back to Roman times. It's called the public trust doctrine. And what it means is that those things that are not susceptible to private property ownership, the air, the water, the wildlife, the fisheries, the public lands, the beaches, and the coral reefs, belong to the people. Everybody has a right to use them. Nobody can use them in a way that will diminish or injure their use and enjoyment by others. So whether you're young or old, or black or white, or rich or poor, or humble or noble, every child in this nation on these islands has an absolute right to cross any beach that they want, throw in a net or throw in a hook and bring out a fish and feed it to their families, or go explore the coral reefs or swim on the beaches. And those rights are being taken from them, and they're fundamental rights. In fact, this is the social safety net. You don't know, whether the government is going to be around to pay welfare payments or unemployment payments, but you always know that if you lose your job, you can go out to the waterway and pull out a fish or catch a lobster. Now, we were in Bimini 3 days ago inspecting the World Resort site, which is an absolute atrocity, and it's what they were trying to do, what Chafin Light, which was a North Carolina developer, and Bechtel, which is an American engineering firm that's one of the largest engineering firms on earth, was trying to do on Jones Beach. Mm-hmm. Jones Beach is the last public access to the water on this island, yes, on New Providence Island. And they were trying to take that over, turn it into a gated community, and they would literally have locked the entire poor population, the native population of the Bahamas, the Bahamian people, into the sweltering center of Nassau with no place to take their children on weekends or holidays. You and I were out there yesterday. the beach and the waters were crowded with
Yes.
hundreds and hundreds of happy people.
Yes.
And that would not have existed anymore if it wasn't the battle that you helped lead.
That's right.
They've done the same thing. Unfortunately, we weren't there quickly enough to stop them in North Bimini. And we took a cab ride. What they've done in North Bimini is World Resort Capo, which is a criminal enterprise, took dredge spoil from the cruise ship channel that they have excavated, and they piled the dredge spoil into the bonefish flats in the bay in North Bimini, covered them up, and created 3 huge islands there. And they're creating a gated community out there. It has beautiful sidewalks, lighting on the sidewalks, but there's fences up to prevent Bahamians from entering it. And we drove out there. We broke through one of the fences. We drove out there with a cab driver, this brilliant, eloquent cab driver. His name was Milton Cox. And as we drove on these dirt roads over these brand new islands, he would tell us, this is where I used to come. If I didn't make enough money in my taxi, I could come out here and I could catch reliably anytime I wanted 2 lobster and come home and feed my wife and my family. There was 750 acres of mangrove that were destroyed. There was 1 billion shrimp that were produced every year in that bay and those shrimp, which no longer exist, which are gone forever, those were the shrimp that were the bottom of the food chain that ends up feeding the marlin and the billfish that everybody comes to Bimini for generations. I grew up hearing about the billfish fishery in Bimini, reading Hemingway's book, Islands in the Sea, which is about Bimini, and hearing all these wonderful stories of bill fishing and bone fishing and lobster and shrimp. And all of that has been monetized. They've treated this island, this beautiful paradise, as if it were a business in liquidation. They've converted these public resources to private cash and robbed them from the people of Bimini. So now you have these towns, Porkytown and Allistown, which grew up there and relied on the fishermen and the divers. There were 14 dive sites, world-class dive sites, World Heritage dive sites, have been absolutely destroyed. 5 of them completely buried. People were flying in from every nation in the world to go diving here in the Bahamas on Bimini. 14 of them that have been destroyed through the sedimentation, and every time one of these cruise ships come in there, it stirs up the sediment again and drops that sediment onto those dive sites, so nobody's going to want to dive there.
Right.
And that was the source of income. That was the social safety net that you could never take away. God gave that to those people, and Capo took it away from them. And it was all done. Anytime you see, Reverend Moss, and I know that you know this, anytime you see a large-scale environmental injury of that magnitude, you're always going to see the subversion of democracy. You're going to see the corruption of public officials. You're going to see the capture of the agencies that are supposed to protect us from pollution. You'll see the loss of transparency in government, the loss of local democracy. None of those benefits are going to accrue to the people of Bimini. They're living in squalor and in poverty. They don't have sidewalks. Many of them that we saw don't have running water in their homes. And a few blocks away, behind a huge gate, living inside of a bubble, are people living in the lap of absolute luxury on top of their former bay that was feeding them and providing them a livelihood and increasing their property values. All of that has been stolen from them, and there's no public official and no human being in the Bahamas who can look at that criminal atrocity that we saw this week and say, this is a good thing for the Bahamas. From the beginning, even in their own environmental assessment reports, they were saying, this is going to destroy the environment, it's not going to work economically, but somebody in the government approved it. And you know that had to be corruption. But the only way something like that gets approved is through secrecy and under-the-table payoffs. And I'm telling you right now, somebody got paid off for that development, because there's no way they would have approved that development on its own merits. It had to be something else. And, you know, while we were driving through that resort, the cab driver pulled into a driveway and said, "This home belongs to the minister that approved this resort." So that was very suspicious to us.
Well, you know, obviously you have not lost any of your passion over the last 20 years. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back, and we're really going to explore the progress in our efforts to save Clifton. Don't go away, folks. We'll be right back.
Only love can save us now.